What is up, guys? Welcome back into the In Our Tourists We Trust Road Show, the Show Must Go On edition. If you're new here, first and foremost, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button. We're making Bulls content all the time, even when we're living out of hotels like I am right now. Hopefully going to get back and stay with my folks starting tomorrow and get back to a little bit of normalcy. I won't be back home until next week. But for now, like I said, we press on. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. And hey, if you haven't heard, the Arturis Super Fan Club, only $4.99 a month. You get exclusive videos, early access to videos, exclusive ways to communicate with me. I just posted a behind-the-scenes photo of me making this video right now. So $4.99 a month, it supports me directly. Strongly consider you guys checking it out. So the stuff that we need to get to, though, the report coming from Shams Charania from The Athletic. You guys saw the report. I was tweeting about it. A lot of people have been talking about it. And we've already been talking about it for a long time, actually, and that's Paul Millsap. The Bulls are looking for different ways to fill out the rest of their roster. The Bulls have 2 roster slots left and 1 two-way contract that they can give out to a player to split time between the G League and the NBA this season. And the name that we keep bringing up for one of those 2 remaining roster spots is Paul Millsap. So the report from Shams Charania says that the Bulls are one of a few teams that are interested in Paul Millsap, being the Golden State Warriors, the Brooklyn Nets, and I believe the Los Angeles Clippers. Those other teams actually have fewer avenues to acquire Paul Millsap than the Bulls do right now, believe it or not. The Bulls still have a little bit left of their biannual exception, just a little bit over $3.5 million that they can spend on a player, and then they also still have the ability to use that traded player exception to acquire a player, maybe in another sign-in trade. And since the Bulls are not yet over the cap, they can go ahead and execute one of those sign-in trades, and the traded player exception is for about $5 million. Paul Millsap has been rumored to not be interested in taking a veteran minimum contract. So those things will play in our favor. The Nets, I don't think, have any of those resources available. The Warriors do, I believe, but there's some kind of funkiness with how much money that they would actually be able to end up giving him. Same thing with Clippers. Now, if the Bulls were to execute a sign-in trade to get Paul Millsap, it would have to be for a 3-year deal, a multi-year deal. That's just the restrictions on sign-in trades. But we could maybe front load that as a guaranteed contract only in the first year. Shouldn't say front load, but just only guarantee the first year of the deal and not guarantee the remainder of the deal if they wanted to make it like a glorified 1-year deal. 3 years on paper, but 1 year actually guaranteed. So that is a possibility for the Bulls if they want to go that route. If Paul Millsap is interested in signing with, Arturis Karnisovas, who gave him, $90 million as his first big contract as GM of the Denver Nuggets back in the day. So there's a little bit of history there. There's some ties there. But also just like Paul Millsap coming into a situation on a team that has young talent that he could help elevate and be a good depth piece for. Now, of course, you can make the argument, you go to Brooklyn, try to chase a ring, go to Golden State, be a part of the culture there. Clippers, same thing, be a part of the culture there. It's interesting to see what Paul Millsap ends up doing. I'm kind of curious why Denver doesn't want to bring him back. It seems to not be a thing. Don't really see that being talked about at all. So I guess it's just not happening. But it is interesting. He did decline in production last season. We're talking about a guy who, for the majority of his career, averaged double digits in points. Obviously a big rebounder. Able to play some defense. Last year, it was the first time he's averaged fewer than double-digit points in over a decade. So not great, but once again, we're talking about a depth piece, not a guy that we're expecting to come in and play heavy minutes. Now, another question becomes, does he want to sign with a team that will make him a starter? And, I don't know if that's us. Patrick Williams is slated to be in that 4 slot right now, and if we were to give Paul Millsap that kind of guarantee of, yes, you can come here and be the starter, for one, I would feel bad about taking that away from Patrick Williams, who, by all accounts, has earned it. With what we've seen his rookie season and how he's progressed just defensively. Paul Millsap, to his credit, is a perennial playoff player. He brings a ton of veteran experience, brings a ton of toughness on defense, blocks shots, gets boards, just your classic power forward who can also stretch the floor. But Patrick Williams is the future. He is the future of our team. Pulling him out of the starting lineup would feel kind of crappy. But two, on the flip side of that, you can start Paul Millsap, but still give Patrick Williams the majority of the minutes and bring him off the bench early and have him close out games. So it's kind of one of those pat Paul Millsap on the back. You could be the starter, but Patrick Williams is the more important player. I'm not a fan personally of starting Paul Millsap just because of what we've already talked about, the dip in production, some of those things that would make him much better suited to come off the bench with the second unit that desperately could use some of his shooting. And now I know his shooting from beyond the arc has kind of also dipped. We're talking about a lot of dips. He's an older guy, north of 30. It's not, you're not bringing in someone in their prime like his Atlanta days or even some of the early Denver days. So Paul Millsap still has a ton to give to a team, and I think one of the things that this team is desperately needing is playoff experience. Obviously, we've brought in Alex Caruso, we've brought in DeMar DeRozan, but Paul Millsap, another all-star, another guy who's been in the playoffs most of his career, just never hurts to have that kind of experience on your team. So I'm all for bringing in Paul Millsap. I just don't want to, to dredge up something from some of my Bears fans out there. I don't want to bring in a guy and guarantee him the starting spot because we have a young player, a young talented player who is ready to be the starter instead. So you guys know who I'm talking about. And yeah, it would be kind of a crappy situation in my opinion to tell Patrick Williams, hey, you're headed to the bench because this old fart wants to chase a ring on our team. And I'm being hyperbolic, but you know what I mean? It for a guy who really, in my opinion, will benefit from being a part of the starting lineup with DeMar DeRozan, with Zach LaVine, with Lonzo Ball, getting open shots because those guys will be preoccupied, or the defense will be preoccupied with those guys. Paul Millsap is a very, very good offensive player, a solid defensive player. He'll be able to get his shots on the second unit no matter what, especially with, Alex Caruso, being kind of our sixth man, manning that second unit next to Tony Bradley, who's going to be a really good defensive piece coming off the bench, next to Derek Jones Jr. or, Troy Brown Jr. or Kobe White. Actually, we should talk about Derek Jones Jr. and Troy Brown Jr. in a second here. But my personal opinion, you're going to bring in Paul Millsap. It should be with the understanding that, hey, you're going to be coming off the bench as one of our most important bench pieces. You are a huge part of this rotation, but you are letting Patrick Williams shine because he is ready to shine and he will benefit so much from playing with that starting unit. I know there's something to be said for the idea of maybe giving Patrick Williams run with the second unit to let him play make a little bit more and facilitate offense a little bit more, which I'm all for. Once again, I just feel like you're sacrificing some defense in the starting lineup. Patrick Williams has so much versatility. Paul Millsap is a very tough player. I'm not going to take that away from him. But the versatility of Patrick Williams to be able to defend basically 2 through 5, 2 through 4 more realistically, but he's able to man up against the best player on the opposite side of the court. If you take him off the court and replace him with Paul Millsap, you're looking at maybe Zach LaVine or Lonzo Ball being that guy. You're not going to put Paul Millsap on a guy like Paul George, a guy like James Harden. It's just that's not sustainable for the entirety of a game. Patrick Williams is going to have to be that guy, and of course they can split reps doing that. It's just starting a game and finishing a game obviously are two different things, but I would like to see Patrick Williams doing both of those things. So that's my 2 cents on Paul Millsap. We already talked about the contract situation. The Bulls have between $3.5 to $5 million to make this thing work, and get him in here on either a sign and trade or using the remainder of that biannual exception, depending on what kind of agreement they're able to come to. So for now, we will see how that plays out. Like I said, there's other teams that are in the mix here, but the history between AK and Paul Millsap, the fact that another report came out saying that the Bulls actually took Lauri Markkanen out of the sign and trade to get DeMar DeRozan and put Thad Young into that sign and trade. Originally, I was going off and this was something that was reported, I was going off the report that the Spurs didn't want to give Lauri Markkanen the money he was looking for, and that's why it ended up being Thad Young in the sign and trade. The more recent report is that the Bulls actually, of their own accord, took Lauri Markkanen out of that trade. And when I heard that, at first I was kind of pissed, because we wanted Thad Young would be great depth for this team right now. And then I started to think about it a little bit more, and it in a weird way, it makes sense that the Bulls wanted to get draft capital back for Lauri Markkanen separate from the DeMar DeRozan sign and trade, right? Because they had to give up draft capital to get DeMar DeRozan. So you throw Thad Young in there, you get his salary off the books, and then you go and pursue another trade to get draft capital for Lauri Markkanen to recoup those picks that you sent out for Lonzo Ball and DeMar DeRozan, which is exactly what they ended up doing. So my thought process on that, like I said, at first was I was pissed, and then I thought about it a little more, and I realized I think the idea there was to separate those two trades out. You probably weren't going to get a first rounder for Thad Young, but you could for Lauri Markkanen in a separate trade instead of doing the DeMar DeRozan swap. So I think it ended up working out actually a little bit better draft capital wise, because now we have that extra first round pick, the extra second round pick, and hey, guess what? The second round pick that we got in the Derrick Jones Jr. and Lauri Markkanen trade is from Denver. So if Denver wants their pick back, wants that second round pick back, maybe that's the sign and trade we execute to get Paul Millsap. So all of it kind of feels like a plan, right? It feels like there's more at play here. Maybe this was kind of being talked about a long time in advance, and we just didn't know. So that was kind of my thought process on it all. After I thought about it for a while, was like, okay, maybe there is a bigger plan here. It's not just, oh, well, we're going to trade Thad Young because we just want to get off his salary. The idea there was, we can get draft capital that we can then flip into the player, Paul Millsap, that we want for depth. And like Thad Young, you can make the case as probably a better overall value player, younger. But at this stage, I think the scoring you'll get from Paul Millsap, obviously the ability to stretch the court with Paul Millsap, and having the defensive ability will be super, super key if the Bulls do end up getting him. So that's my 2 cents on the entire Paul Millsap situation. We will see how it plays out. The thing about Derrick Jones Jr. and Trey Brown Jr. I just want to mention real quick, just something to keep in mind with those guys. There's going to be a competition there. There's going to be a competition at the backup 3 spot. I know that some people have said Derrick Jones Jr. can play the 4 a little bit. It's just not a natural fit for him. Same thing with Trey Brown Jr. I'm sure he can slide between the 2 and 3. Don't see him playing much of the 4 personally, at least from what I've seen, albeit in limited minutes last season, just because he had that injury. He plays bigger than he actually is, so I could see it eventually down the line. But in training camp and preseason, that's going to be a competition between Derrick Jones Jr. and Trey Brown Jr. And competition, as they say, coaches say it. I'm sure if you guys played college ball, high school ball, football, basketball, I don't care what sport it was. I'm sure you've had a coach say to you at some point, competition breeds success. And it's true. If you got 2 guys who work their asses off, the Bulls just posted a photo today of Trey Brown Jr. in the gym. If you've got guys who work their asses off day in and day out, and you tell them, all right, only one of you can get this. One of you can get this spot. Only one of you can get these minutes. There's only so many minutes to go around. Those dudes are going to go at it, and it's going to be fun to watch. So I'm excited to see how that competition shakes out. I'm really excited to see. I know I keep mentioning him, but I love Trey Brown Jr., and I think he's a really good player. I'm excited for Derrick Jones Jr. I'm excited for the lobs. I'm excited for the dunks, but Trey Brown Jr. just does so much, and I'm so high on him that having the added boost of a competition to win, to prove to coaches, to prove to his teammates that he deserves to get those minutes, just sky's the limit, man. So something I was excited about and wanted to mention. We talked about Zach LaVine joining Clutch Sports. That was officially announced. I think that was most of the news. I think that covered all of it. If anything, you guys know how it is. If anything new pops up, I will be covering it. Maybe a day late because, travel and all that stuff. I'm living out of hotels. But like I said, tomorrow, hopefully get back to some normalcy. I got some cool stuff planned for you guys, actually. Going to be back in my childhood home, which will be interesting. And going to be looking through some of my old sports memorabilia. Going to do a little video on that, and that should be a fun time. So look out for that in the next couple days. And for now, I guess, yeah, man, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. Make sure to follow me at Arturus Fan Club on all platforms. I don't have all my fancy graphics up. I'm doing this on the fly, but you guys know once I get back to it next week, the fancy graphics will be back. So thank you guys for bearing with me, and we will talk very soon.